Okay, Mystic Rob here. Uh, I'm not even sure why I'm making this video. I've just got a whole bunch of stories in my head of things that I've learned and experiences I've had. And this is one that I had learned from my teacher when I was studying under a Chinese teacher. And it's about rigidity and about Taoist thinking versus Confucian thinking. And or Confusa is how he was is a more appropriate pronunciation of his name, but here in the West we call him Confucius. And Confucius had a very strict system, or at least it was interpreted in a very strict manner. The element of lie, which the most proponents of it said that you needed to adhere to it strictly. Now, the story is about a general. This general, he goes off into war, and there's this decisive battle. And in this decisive battle, he has the advantage. He has basically cornered the enemy, and the next day he's about to descend upon the enemy and take them out. But the enemy does have some very, very good spies who have been able to kidnap the son of the general. So what happens is they send an envoy to the general and say, "We have captured your son. If you retreat now, we will spare him. If you do not retreat, we will boil him alive." Well, the general had a duty to his emperor. So he said to the envoy, the message he wanted him to return to the other general was, "Before dawn tomorrow, bring me the soup of my son, and I will drink it before I defeat you." So the next morning, a group from the other opposing, they honored his wish, and they had boiled his son alive, and they brought him the broth of that, and the general drank it, and then descended upon the enemy and destroyed them. Now, I mean, it seems heartless, but he was following his duty to the emperor. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. As the general returns to the emperor and reports to him on the victory, he also tells him the part about his son and the sacrifice that was made in order to win the battle. And the emperor basically said, "Thank you so much for your service. I am sorry for your sacrifice. Tomorrow, at dawn, you shall be beheaded." And the next morning, they cut the general's head off. Now, what is interesting about this story is it depicts the cultural values of the time, in which Confucianism, the first edict of Confucianism, father, father, for the father to be a father, was the most important rule of all. Yet the general could not, ignore his duty in defending the kingdom. So he was really in a no-win scenario. No matter what he did, his fate was sealed from the moment his son was captured. Now, this is a story that, as I understand it, is used to explain the advantage of Taoist thinking over Confucian thinking. Is that a Taoist could be more fluid and say, well, sorry for your sacrifice, we will retire you, we're going to find a solution that doesn't make you pay for your sacrifice with your own life. Now, the funny thing is, this is not at all a condemnation of Confucianism, because the whole Confucian ethic, I feel, is what our society here in America is lacking. It's just that the idea is that you can't take any system so rigidly that you adhere to it without discretion. So another thing that my teacher had taught me was there's a verse somewhere, I'm not sure where, it's in the Analects or where, but the story goes that someone wanted to approach the king or the emperor for counsel. And as was tradition, you bow before you ascend the podium. Well, what this individual did was he ascended the podium, and in the presence, directly in front of the emperor, he bowed. And this created a stir. Well, this guy's not following the rules. You're supposed to bow before you even ascend the podium. What's going on here? And so they apparently they consulted Confucius about this. And Confucius, or Confusa, said, you may bow before or after you ascend the podium. And so the thought from that point was you either bow before you ascended the staircase or after or afterwards, but you did one or the other. But what was intended, and this is where my Taoist teacher, or my Chinese teacher, who was predominantly Taoist, taught, the interpretation was wrong. Confucius was not saying you had to bow before or after, but what was important was showing reverence to the emperor. So if you stopped halfway and bowed, as long as you showed that reverence, and once again, this is a fine example of where we need to start being more fluid in our thinking, being more fluid in how we view life, and particularly with what's going on in the world right now. The thing that I like to, I see people who become instantly converted to wanting to save the planet, and that doesn't work because you can't overnight turn into this, I'm going to, stop using fuel and stop eating these kinds of food and just be, a total hippie. It's got to be a gradual process. We all need to move that direction, but not become fanatical in any way of thought. And I believe that if we start moving, if we start putting forth the idea that we need to make changes, but it does, we need to do things like find, and this is what's happening to some degree. Buy cars that use less gas. Do this. Make steps in the right direction. You don't have to, sell your house and join a commune and, live off the land tomorrow. Some of us, maybe that's what we're ready for. But the point that I'm making is we need to be fluid in how we move closer to the direction of what society needs and what our culture needs and what the planet needs. We can't adopt a way of thinking that is rigid in any context. And I just wanted to put that idea out because I like the story. I think it makes a perfect example of what is wrong with rigid thinking. And when you look at the politics of what's going on today, those clowns in Washington, they will never understand this. But maybe we can, and maybe if we do, then in time, the right kind of changes can be made. Peace.